All right, we want to look at situations where it's necessary to apply the cosine rule to find answers in a question involving bearings. So we have a question here which involves bearings, but we're going to ultimately apply cosine rule to answer the question. So let's look at it. A man prospecting for oil in the desert leaves his base camp and drives 42 kilometers on a bearing of 32 degrees. So the first part of the journey is that it's going to be 42 kilometers on a bearing of 32 degrees. So 42 kilometers is the first distance, and the bearing there is 32 degrees. And then what happens? He then drives 28 kilometers on a bearing of 154 degrees. So he's going to travel another distance of 28 kilometers, and now the bearing is 154 degrees. How far is he from his base camp? So how far is he at the end from its starting point, and what is his bearing from it? So for us to really understand what's happening here, we need to draw a diagram, right, to show what was happening there. So we need to start off with the first thing that happens. He moves 42 degrees on a bearing of 42 kilometers, sorry, on a bearing of 32 degrees. Now, what do we know? Bearing is always measured from a north line, so we need to mark his base camp first. So I'm going to start off by marking his base camp and say this is his base camp here, right? I can call his base camp X, right? And then from there, what do? We draw a north line going through that point, because bearing is measured from the north. And then we know he's going to travel in a direction 32 degrees from the north. So 32 degrees will be something like this. You don't have to measure it. You just have to sketch, right? 32 degrees, and it's going to move a distance of 42 kilometers, right? 42 kilometers. So that's the first part of his journey. He moves 32 degrees direction, and his distance is 42 kilometers. Then from his next point, he's going to move another 28 kilometers on a bearing of 154. 154 is a bearing which is measured from the north, because bearing is always measured from the north, this three-figure bearing. So if this is the north, 154 will look something like this, right? So that's like 154 degrees. And then he's going to move short distance, something like this, which is 28 kilometers, right? And this is his final point, right? Which I can just call P for interest sake. So this is how we moved. 42 kilometers on a bearing of 32 degrees. Go to the next point, moved 154 degree direction and 28 kilometers. And now what's the first thing? The first thing is, what is his, how far is he from his base camp? So what's his distance from the base camp? So we're looking for this distance here from X to P, right? What's the distance from his base camp? Now, what do we realize? We now have a triangle. This is a triangle, three-sided shape. And XP, which is the distance we're looking for, is one of the sides of that triangle. So XP is really what we're looking for, right? Now, we can use cosine rule as long as we know this angle here, right? So as long as we know this angle here, we can use cosine rule, because effectively we have a triangle that looks like this. We have a triangle here with X and P, and then here we have 42 kilometers, and then there we have 28 kilometers. Now we just need this angle here, and then we can apply cosine rule to find XP. So how do I find this angle here? The first thing I do is I understand that this line is pointing towards the north, and this line is pointing towards the north. So these two lines are parallel, so they look something like this. The two lines are parallel like this. Okay, that's a north line, that's a north line. So if there's a line joining them like this, we have alternate angles, right? What we usually call Z angles. This is a Z angle, right? We can see our Z. So this angle and that angle will be equal, right? So similarly, if this is 32, here I also have a 32 degrees, right? There. The angle here and the angle there are equal. And then on the other side here, I want to find this small angle here. What do I know? This is a straight line. Angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. So if I subtract 154 from 180, I get 26 degrees there. So I have 32 degrees there, and I have 26 degrees there. If I add this up, this is going to give you 58 degrees. So that's my angle there, 58 degrees. So now I can easily apply cosine rule to find xp, right? So what do I write? This is my triangle just to keep it there. This is x, that's p, that's 58, that's 42 kilometers, and then that's 28 kilometers. I know xp squared is going to be equal to 42 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times 42 times 28 cos 58. That's a 28. So xp squared, if I submit this to the calculator, I'll get 1301,6299. Now this is xp squared, so I can square root that to find xp. So square root of 1301,6299 gives you a value for xp, which is going to be 36.1 kilometers. So that's how we find xp. It's quite simple. That's the first part. The second part is, what is his bearing from the base camp? What is the bearing from the base camp? So we need to know now he's here, right, at P, and we want to find his bearing from there, right? So what you need to do, you need to go to the base camp. Let me just use red. Go to the north line clockwise until you get to the line connecting to P. So we're looking for this entire angle there, right? This entire angle is what we're looking for. So we have the first part, which is 32, but we don't know this second part here, right? We don't know what this second part is, right? So we can just call that angle X. But we now know that XP from our calculation is 36.1. So we have a triangle with 3 sides and we're looking for X. So we can draw it, right? Oh, sorry, that's the next part there. We can draw it. Let me just remove most of this. All right, so there we are. XP is 36.1, and now we're just looking for this angle X, right? So what do we do? Cosine rule. Cos of X is equal to 42 squared plus 36.1 squared. That's a 1 there, not a 7. 36.1 squared minus 28 squared, all over 2 times 42 times 36.1, right? So cos of X, if we submit this to the calculator, is going to be equal to 0.7529 rounded off. So X will be equal to arc cos of 0.7529. So X is going to be equal to 41.2 degrees, which when rounded off is approximately 41 degrees. So the angle X is 41 degrees. So if I come back here, that's 32 and that's 41, right? So my bearing is going to be what? A combination of these two, right? I'm just going to add 32 and by 41, right? So the bearing is going to be 32 plus 41, which gives me 73 degrees. But bearing is 3 figures, so it becomes 0, 7, 3. So that's your bearing there. So there you have it. We successfully calculated the distance from the base camp and the bearing from the base camp. The distance from the base camp was 36.1 kilometers, and the bearing from the base camp was 0.73 degrees.